Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Got another Crossout video for us today. Now today's video is going to be quite a bit different. I'm basically just going to be talking about a less than desirable part of Crossout that has been in the meta for years and years and years, and something that I really hope the developers get around to essentially changing or removing from the game. Now I'm going to say this is probably going to annoy quite a few people because it will, if they did make these changes, it would get on quite a lot of people's nerves because they would have to either scrap or completely redesign quite a lot of their builds. But I think that if they were to get rid of this feature, then it would be a very healthy thing for the game going forward and very beneficial in the long term. Now, I'm going to explain why and just go through the story of this to start with. So, before I just unlocked compilers essentially a couple of days ago, and before I had this, before I unlocked them, I should say, I was watching quite a lot of Clan Wars footage and whatnot, and I was very curious as to why you never saw any compiler either meat grinders or ML200s. Because on paper, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It would be a lot like it's a very generalist cannon, and it's very good at what it does. And it would be kind of like a Typhoon version, but it would do better damage up close, and it would just be like if you didn't afford you couldn't afford Typhoon, for instance, then you could run a compiler split build or compiler meat grinder, compiler spider, and it would be a good generalist all-rounder because that's kind of the meta at the moment. Is you'd have like really big heavy builds on say like a Scorpion meat grinder or Scorpion ML or a Typhoon meat grinder, Typhoon ML, something like that. Something that can fight anything, and they're very, very good at the moment. So it's curious, like why did you never see these in Clan Wars? Because on paper they'd be really good, and I didn't realize until I actually got my hands on them. And there's an interesting thing about the compiler is that you cannot mount it anywhere but upright or sideways, I suppose. You can't flip it essentially. You cannot mount this sideways onto a cabin. You cannot mount this upside down. Now that is a pretty huge change for guns because the majority of guns in this game, even the very heaviest like a Mastodon, for example. Where's the Mastodon? You can flip it. You can mount this on a side of the carbine. I can mount this upside down if I so choose, even though it weighs like 2.5 tons. There's no irrelevance in Crossout. It doesn't matter. That's not how the physics engine works. So I can mount this any way I want. And I was thinking that, to be honest, if I'm thinking back about the 4 or so years of Clan Wars that I played in this game, so I took a break, what, a couple of months ago at this point, maybe 2 months ago. But the 4 years before that, I was sweating her out in top Clan Wars, playing all of the meta builds. And the meta for the past probably 3 years on PlayStation at least. I'm going to talk about PlayStation here because that's what I played, and so I'm going to talk about the PlayStation meta. But the last like 3 odd years, maybe 4 years of PlayStation meta has been heavy builds for the majority of the time, for the most part, for about 3 years now. And the reason why it's been a heavy meta in the game, one of the main reasons, is because you are able to mount guns sideways and upside down, and they are called split builds. And I'll show you what a split build is in the game. It's quite common. It's very common at the moment, to be honest. So a split build is something like this, where the guns are mounted sideways behind the cabin, and they are split down the middle like this. Now, this makes use of a very interesting mechanic in Crossout in that essentially cabins in the game, I'm going to boil this down for newer players, cabins are basically indestructible until you lose all of your HP, of course. So if I were to put a Punisher, so if I was to, yes, okay, configure the button. Yeah, so if I was a Punisher player, if I was running this Punisher, for example, if I was an enemy player at this angle, for instance, there is no way in the game for me to shoot through this cabin and damage the Punishers behind. So essentially, the cabin is indestructible until it loses its 8,000 durability, which means that the Punishers you are able to mount guns sideways behind the cabin like this, like a split build. You will see this on everything in the game. It is a version of everything like this because it's a very meta choice. So you'll see Punishers, you'll see Stillwinds, got a Narwhal at 10k, got an Executioner at 10k, Scorpions you'll see, Mastodons you'll see, it doesn't matter, it's all split builds. And the whole point is that it protects the guns incredibly well because you are able to shield them behind the cabin. Say if the enemy is here, for instance, all you've really got to do is when he's shooting, just go like this, and you do not have to worry about your squishy guns. It turns very vulnerable guns. Say if I was up against a Scorpion, for example, a Scorpion Hover. Scorpion Hovers with Jackie, I think they do 630 damage per shot. If I were charging a Scorpion Jackie in a Punisher build like this, I don't really have to worry that my guns only have 450 Dura. Even though they're one shot for the Scorp, the Scorpion's going to have an incredibly hard time actually hitting these guns. And because the guns are mounted behind the cabin, you are able to lock the firing angle so that your guns do not block out to the left or the right with the armor. So it's just incredibly efficient using split builds. Now, I really think that it would be very healthy for the game if these types of builds like this were to be removed or just like limited as much as possible. I don't think that your guns should be able to be mounted sideways or upside down. The reason I say this is because if I'm thinking to a lot of the meta choices in the game, a lot of the stupid meta over the years has resulted of you being able to either position things or mount things on your build that they aren't originally intended for. Like, for example, you can mount a Goliath, that's a movement part, in front of your cabin on a spider and it never touches the ground. It's just really efficient armor. And that's not how it's designed to be, but you're sort of positioning something on your build in a way that's not meant to be incredibly effective. Same thing with the Scorpions and the split builds. You were able to position them behind the cab, use your cabin as indestructible armor, which means because you have this angle cleared, all of the rest of the armor of your build, which is quite a lot, can be wrapped around the Scorpion, and it's just incredibly efficient. And I would really like it if it could be moved. If you think about the stupid meta as well, say like frontal mandrakes, it's a way of positioning things in a way that's not meant to. Like the old the Draco bricks that you used to come across, the Draco dogs wheel builds. They would position the Dracos underneath the cabin so that you just couldn't hit them. You can shoot through the cab. There's no weapon in the game anymore can shoot through a cabin. The Scorpions used to be able to. They could shoot through 6 squares, but even with heavy cabs, I guess you can't do it anymore. And the reason it's so effective on big builds, so heavy builds, is because the cabins are so large. You're able to protect a lot of stuff behind them. So you have your guns here and then all your squishy modules here and then just wrap it around with armor essentially. It's a very efficient design, but I don't think it's a very balanced way of doing things. I don't think it's in the spirit of the game either. For example, if this was back in the day, before this was meta, if you wanted to do something like Punisher, for example, before people discovered split builds, you would have to have, say, a Punisher mounted here, a Punisher mounted here, and say a Punisher mounted underneath, for example, on a grinder or spider or whatever. That meant that each individual Punisher would have less armor protecting it, which meant that the guns were overall more vulnerable. Now, because the split builds have come into the game, the heavy builds have just dominated ever since, basically, because it's really hard for you to play against them in hovers, and it's really hard for you to play against them in, well, general dogs as well, because you can't hit the guns reliably at all, and they're very safe. For anyone who's played the heavy split builds over the years, you will know that a lot of the times you can basically just go onto autopilot. You can just charge the enemy. You don't really have to worry about your guns. You don't have to worry about your 8,000 HP cabin, and you can just trade blow for blow and just win out on numbers, essentially. It's not a very engaging playstyle, and it's not a very fun playstyle. For example, if you play PvP on console, you will hardly ever see spider players or meat grinder players. The reason you don't see them is because they're incredibly boring to play. The only reason people run them is because they're very, very effective. So I think if you're looking for the health of the game going forward, if you're looking at the health of the game going forward, I really think that builds like this should be limited as much as possible because it really helps the fat spiders and the fat meat grinder builds. And I think those things can use a huge nerf anyway, to be honest. They've been on top and far too easy to play for far too long. And a lot of it is because of split build designs like this. So I don't know particularly why I wanted to make this video, but I just wanted to talk about it and explain that if the devs are looking at how to improve the game going forward, I think they should try something like this in, say, Battle for Uranium. I think that's a really good test bed for the game. You could do a battle for uranium where you can't mount any guns sideways or upside down, just to see the types of designs that come into the game and just to see the balance of the game overall, you know? I think that would be really interesting. Do the same like Power Score Cap as Clan Wars. You don't have to do it, say, the once a month or anything, just at a random point. Just chuck it in just to see how it works. I think would be really good for the game overall. Anyway, that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you all for listening to me rant, and I will catch you for tomorrow's video.